You'd think traveling the ancient world's most famous trade route would be glamorous. Exotic silks, precious gems, and spices so rare they're worth their weight in gold. Wrong. Brutal weather, murderous bandits, and imperial tax collectors so ruthless they'd make modern IRS agents look like charitable organizations. Welcome to life as a Silk Road merchant during the Mongol Empire. My name is Yakov Dushanbe, merchant of fine silks and spices, and I'm about to tell you why my chosen profession was the absolute worst career choice in the 13th century. Let's start with the obvious. The Silk Road wasn't a road. It wasn't even a single route. It was a sprawling network of treacherous paths stretching over 4,000 miles from China to the Mediterranean. Imagine the longest, most dangerous commute of your life, except it takes months. There are no rest stops, and the highway patrol might kill you for your cargo. The year is 1267, and I've just set out from Samarkand with my most ambitious caravan yet. 3 dozen camels loaded with silk, jade, and spices that would make European nobility weep with desire. My wife Parvana Alikova thinks I'm insane, and honestly, she's probably right. Yakov, she said before I left. The last merchant who tried crossing the Taklamakan desert returned without his goods, half his men, and most of his sanity. I laughed it off. That's why they call it the Desert of Death. My dear, it adds excitement to our profit margins. Spoiler alert, the excitement was not worth the profit margins. The first historically accurate misery of Silk Road merchants? The weather. Oh, the weather. Summer temperatures in the Taklamakan could reach 120 degrees during the day, then plummet below freezing at night. My favorite moment was watching my assistant Ibrahim trying to explain to our clients why their premium silk was stained with camel sweat and desert sand. It's the latest Samarkand fashion, he'd say with a straight face. And the sand. Everywhere. In your food, your clothes, your eyes, well, places sand should never be. One morning I woke up with so much sand in my beard that small desert creatures had established a thriving community there. Ibrahim, I called out one morning, my tea tastes strange. That's because it's half sand, sir, he replied cheerfully. I've started calling it Taklamakan Crunch Tea. Very exotic, very exclusive. But the weather was just the appetizer to the feast of suffering that was Silk Road commerce during the Pax Mongolica. Now, I should clarify something historically important. The Mongol Empire actually made the Silk Road safer than it had been in centuries. Genghis Khan and his successors established what historians call the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability across Asia that allowed trade to flourish. They created the Yam system, a network of post stations about 20 to 30 miles apart, where merchants could rest, change horses, and find shelter. Sounds great, right? Wrong. Welcome to Yam Station number 37, announced the cheerful Mongol official. That'll be 3 silver pieces for water, 5 for shelter, 10 for horse feed, and 20 for not informing the local military commander that you look suspicious. But I don't look suspicious, I protested. You do now, he smiled. That'll be an extra 5 pieces for arguing. The Mongols may have created unprecedented trade stability, but they also created unprecedented ways to tax everything that moved along their routes. Which brings me to historical misery number 2, taxation. The Mongol Empire had an elaborate system of tax collection that would make a modern accountant's head spin. Different regions had different rates. Different goods had different tariffs. Different seasons had different fees. There were entrance taxes, exit taxes, transit taxes, and my personal favorite, the "we just made this up because you look wealthy" tax. One fine morning in Bokhara, a Mongol tax collector approached our caravan. "Merchant Yakov," he said, consulting his scroll, "I see you're carrying silk, jade, and spices." "That's correct," I replied proudly. "Excellent. That's a 10% silk tax, 15% jade tax, 12% spice tax, 5% camel utilization tax, 3% road maintenance contribution, and 20% for the Great Khan's summer palace renovations. That's over half my cargo," I protested. "Yes," he nodded sympathetically. "And there's also a 2% complaining tax. And here's the real historical irony. While the Mongol Empire made the roads safer from bandits, They essentially institutionalized highway robbery through taxation. Genghis Khan himself once said, "Conquering the world on horseback is easy. It is dismounting and governing that is hard." Apparently, governing meant taxing merchants until they wept. But let's talk about the actual bandits, shall we? Because despite improved security, they still existed, which brings us to historical misery number 3. When your cargo is worth more than some entire villages, you become a walking target. Picture this: we're crossing the Pamir Mountains. The path is narrow, the drop is 1,000 feet, and our caravan stretches like a vulnerable thread through the landscape. Suddenly, figures appear on the ridges above. "Greetings, wealthy merchant," shouted their leader. "We are the Mountain Hospitality Committee, here to relieve you of your excessive burden of valuables." "We've already paid taxes to the Mongol authorities," I called back. "We're protected." The bandit leader laughed. "The nearest Mongol outpost is 3 days' ride. I'm sure they send their warmest regards." What followed was a negotiation so tense it made diplomatic relations between empires look like child's play. I ended up gifting them several rolls of silk and a box of saffron in exchange for not being thrown off the mountain. Later that night, my guard captain, a grizzled Turkic veteran named Kadir, approached me by the fire. "You handled that well," he said, gnawing on dried meat. "We lost valuable merchandise," I replied bitterly. "But we kept our heads," he pointed out. "Last month, the Fong caravan tried to fight off bandits. Now their skulls decorate the pass as a warning. Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I asked. "No," he shrugged. "Just accurate." Speaking of accuracy, let me tell you about the absolute joy of navigation in the 13th century. No GPS, no Google Maps, just stars, landmarks, and local guides who might be leading you to their bandit friends. We hired a guide in Kashgar who swore he knew a shortcut through the mountains. "This path will save you 2 weeks," he promised, eyes gleaming. 3 days later, we were hopelessly lost. "Good news," he announced cheerfully. "I've discovered we're not where I thought we were." "Where are we then?" I demanded. "That," he admitted, "remains a mystery of the universe. We eventually found our way, but not before losing a week and 3 camels to a bog he failed to mention. Then there were the delightful cross-cultural misunderstandings. The Silk Road connected vastly different civilizations, each with their own customs, languages, and ways to misinterpret innocent gestures as deadly insults. In a Chinese market town, I accidentally turned down a cup of tea from a local official by holding up my hand, palm outward. Apparently, this was the equivalent of saying his ancestors were diseased goats. It took 3 silk handkerchiefs and a jar of saffron to smooth things over. "Yaakov," Ibrahim whispered after the official left, "perhaps we should learn the local customs before entering new territories?" "Nonsense," I replied confidently. "Commerce is a universal language." The next day, I accidentally proposed marriage to an elderly shopkeeper by admiring his jade collection while standing on my left foot. The universal language of commerce somehow failed to translate. Disease was another constant companion. The Silk Road wasn't just a highway for goods, it was a superhighway for every illness known to mankind. The Black Death itself traveled these routes, though thankfully a few decades after my time. Still, we had plenty of other plagues to choose from. My personal favorite was the mysterious fever that struck our caravan outside Merv. Half my men were delirious, convinced the camels were speaking to them in poetry. The tall one recited a beautiful ode about desert stars, mumbled my accountant, pointing to a particularly grumpy camel. "That's Omar," I replied. "He bites. He doesn't compose poetry." "You just don't understand his artistic soul," the accountant whispered before passing out. Our caravan physician, a learned man who studied in Baghdad, prescribed a treatment of bloodletting, strange herbs, and prayers to at least 3 different deities, covering all spiritual bases. Surprisingly, most survived. And let's not forget the culinary adventures. Food preservation wasn't exactly advanced in the 13th century. By the 3rd month of travel, our provisions had transformed into substances that even the camels approached with suspicion. "What's for dinner?" I asked one evening. "Mystery meat surprise," replied our cook. What's the surprise? If I knew, it wouldn't be a mystery, he explained patiently. The real tragedy of Silk Road merchant life? After months of suffering, after braving deserts and mountains, bandits and tax collectors, disease and disgusting food, after nearly dying a dozen different ways, your profit margins could still disappear in an instant. Markets fluctuated. Wars erupted. Fashion trends changed. You might arrive in Constantinople with a fortune in Chinese silk only to discover that Byzantine nobility had suddenly developed a passion for local linen. Silk? How last season? Sniffed a noble lady when I finally reached the markets of Constantinople. Everyone knows Empress Theodora wore linen at last month's festival. Silk is for peasants now. 8 months of travel, danger, and hardship, rendered worthless by royal fashion whims. The greatest irony of all? Despite creating one of history's most impressive trade networks, most Silk Road merchants didn't get rich. The real wealth accumulated at the ends of the road, in the hands of Chinese manufacturers and European distributors, while we middlemen faced all the dangers for a fraction of the profit. After 15 years and 12 major expeditions across Asia, what did I have to show for it? A modest home in Samarkand, a collection of exotic scars, and enough terrifying stories to ensure my grandchildren never, ever followed in my footsteps. Was it worth it? My wife Parvana asked on my final return, as I collapsed into our home, half dead from exhaustion. Absolutely not, I replied honestly. Will you do it again? I looked at her, thought about the dangers, the misery, the taxation, the bandits, the disease, the sand in unmentionable places. Next spring, I said with a sigh. I hear there's a new route through the Hindu Kush that's only mostly deadly, and that, my friends, is the final tragedy of Silk Road merchants in the Mongol Empire. Despite all the suffering, we kept going back for more, because once you've seen the endless horizon of the Taklamakan, haggled in the markets of Bokhara, or watched dawn break over the Pamir Mountains, ordinary life just seems unbearably dull. Though I suppose dying of old age in a comfortable bed, rather than from bandit arrows in a mountain pass, has a certain appeal too. So the next time you order silk online with one-day delivery and no hidden taxes, pour out a small cup of Taklamakan Crunch tea for us, the merchants who suffered so that future generations could enjoy global trade without having to explain to Mongol officials why their camels looked suspiciously undertaxed.